Hi everybody, there is a war erupting in the geopolitics of 2025 again. And the reason why this is scary is because this war is happening between two of the most powerful countries in the world.
The world's leading superpowers are locking horns.
Game on here. A trade war between the United States and China is here.
China never paid 10 cents to this country. They ripped us off. We're putting on a 25% tariff without exception.
They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. And we take everything from them.
But what would you do? What can you do?
So easy. I drop a 25% tax on China.
We urge the U.S. to correct its action and stop weaponizing trade issues.
The country's finance ministry announcing a 15% tariff on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas.
This is the beginning of making America rich again.
For decades, the United States has dominated the global economy. It made the rules, built the world's biggest corporations, and controlled the world with blood, debt, technology, and also bombs.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Let me tell you something. The United States of America is the most powerful nation on earth.
The dollar came to dominate trade after World War II. The U.S. was the biggest economy in the world.
But now China is the new gangster in town.
China is engaged in a whole-of-state effort to become the world's only superpower by any means necessary.
I think China is playing the long game here. If they want to be the number one economic power in the world.
While the US built a propaganda machine to look down on China, China built a manufacturing empire so powerful that it is holding America by the throat. While America once laughed at Made in China, China is now laughing at America with almost 20% of the world economy in its pocket. So what did Trump do? Donald Trump declared a war. A war not with soldiers or tanks, but with the most powerful weapon of the 21st century, which is economics. And the world is calling this the trade war of the US and China. But you know what, guys? While most people think it is an economic masterstroke, the Wall Street Journal is calling the tariff strategy the dumbest trade war in history.
There may be some better justification for what the journal's editorial board has called the dumbest trade war in history.
This executive order, I did not lose, but I totally won the trade war order.
Donald Trump is doing so many stupidly bad things, so badly stupidly, that it's difficult to keep up.
Starting the world's dumbest trade war is an accomplishment to add to a very long list. First of all, world's dumbest trade war.
They really want Americans to pay more for this MAGA hat. It's made in China, of course, just like almost everything else these days.
So the question is, what is this trade war between US and China? Will this bold move of Trump slow down China? Will it send the world economy crashing down again? And most importantly, with China being at war with America, how will India benefit in this crossfire? Before we move on, this video is sponsored by Smallcase. Smallcase has partnered with banks to offer high interest FDs. On 7th of February, RBI lowered the repo rate by 25 base points. This will likely lead to banks reducing their interest on fixed deposits. So if you're looking for stable, fixed return investments like FDs, now may be the time to invest and lock your investments into higher interest rates. On the Smallcase app, you get fixed deposits offered by multiple RBI regulated banks where you can earn up to 9.3% interest on your fixed deposits. The best part is that you don't need to have or open a savings account to invest in these FDs. And your deposits up to 5 lakhs with each bank are insured by DICGC. Also, the entire process is digital with no physical paperwork. So whether you're planning for retirement or simply seeking a safe investment option, FDs can become a stable component to your investment portfolio. The link to the app is in the description. And just a small disclaimer, guys, always remember, interest rates are subject to change. Chalo, let's start by understanding why does Trump hate China? Well, Donald Trump has 3 strong reasons. Firstly, Donald Trump thinks China is a thief. And he's not entirely wrong because during his tenure in 2018, America discovered something absolutely shocking about China.
President Trump has been a fierce critic of China, accusing it of stealing
U.S. technology that's used in the military.
Trillions of dollars.
Intellectual property.
Nearly all of them somehow connected to China.
We also see a coordinated effort across the Chinese government to lie, cheat, and steal their way into unfairly dominating entire technology sectors.
We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end.
You see, everybody knows that semiconductors are the lifeblood of the world economy, and a company called Micron Technology was a semiconductor titan who had spent billions of dollars and decades of research into building the best semiconductors in the world. Their cutting-edge memory chips powered everything from Apple's iPhones to NASA's spacecrafts. And the fun fact was that China was Micron's biggest customer, accounting for 50% of its revenue. So business was booming and Micron was unstoppable. But then something terrifying happened to Micron. In 2018, some Micron engineers were cleaning the storage room, and while cleaning, they found a laptop that was left by a former employee who had just left Micron. But when they opened the laptop, they were shocked to see that the laptop contained the files of the secret blueprints of their most valuable chips. It was the most spine-chilling thing they had ever seen in their life. So with no time to waste, Micron activated an emergency response task force. Millions of dollars were immediately funneled, every digital footprint was analyzed, every communication was traced, and every possible lead was followed to find these engineers. And finally, what they uncovered was far worse than they imagined. These group of Micron engineers had stolen these designs and hand-delivered them to a Taiwanese firm called Fujian Jinhua. And here's the real shocker. This company, Fujian Jinhua, was backed by the Chinese government. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Instead of facing the punishment or feeling guilty about it, China flipped the script. They started gaslighting Micron. You know what they did? The Chinese courts banned Micron from selling in China and accused Micron of stealing their technology.
The U.S. Justice Department prosecuting companies based in China and Taiwan accused
of stealing its secrets out of Taiwan and acting as a conduit to try and help the Chinese.
China has banned an American company, a memory chip giant called Micron Technology.
The action steps up their ongoing feud with the United States over technology and security.
It really went to war against the Chinese many years ago, saying that they've been stealing intellectual property.
This was so bad for Micron that within some time, Micron lost billions of dollars in value, its stock plummeted, and the company was locked out of its most profitable market. Meanwhile, China prepared to mass produce Micron stolen technology without spending a dime on research. And when this case was taken to court, the Chinese went free due to lack of evidence. But China has done this to American companies again and again and again.
Spy was sentenced today in Cincinnati to 20 years in prison for conspiring to steal GE Aviation trade secrets for China.
The accused man is Mo Hailong, or known as Robert Mo in the U.S. He's accused of stealing at least $30 to $40 million worth of seed technology from both DuPont Pioneer and Monsanto.
This is the first reason why Donald Trump hates China. Secondly, Donald Trump thinks that US and China are like two toxic people in a toxic situationship where the US keeps buying cars, iPhones and semiconductors from China while China just keeps collecting cash and barely buys anything in return. Look at this. In 2024, the US imported approximately $525 billion worth of goods from China. And what did China buy in return? Well, China just bought $164 billion worth of American products, and that's it. So that's a $361 billion trade gap. So every time Americans fill their carts with made in China goods, they're essentially paying for jobs in China while the American manufacturers are going bankrupt. And lastly, Donald Trump believes that China is slowly strangling the United States in such a way that when the war comes, China is capable of paralyzing the US army. And the best case to prove this was Huawei.
Huawei began a concerted effort to steal information about a robot that T-Mobile used to test mobile phones.
Huawei to steal U.S. technology.
Huawei is very dangerous.
Huawei, the Chinese tech giant, of criminal activity in the U.S.
Huawei was famous in their developing years for taking other people's technology.
You mean steal it?
Technically, yes.
Did you know that in 2019, the US Department of Justice exposed a chilling truth? Huawei had been stealing secrets from 6 American tech companies, and they were not just stealing ideas. They were stealing source codes, blueprints, and confidential manuals. Then in 2022, the FBI uncovered something even more scary. Huawei's telecom equipments were quietly installed near the US military bases and nuclear missile silos. And these equipments had the capability to intercept and even disrupt highly classified Defense Department communications. In fact, Huawei was such a dangerous company that the United States ended up banning Huawei altogether.
On May the 15th, President Trump had effectively banned Huawei and termed it a threat to national security.
Anything having to do with national security, we're not dealing with Huawei.
These are the reasons why Donald Trump is waging an economic war against China, which the world is calling the trade war between US and China. And here's how it works out. Let's take a real-world example of an electric vehicle. A Chinese-made EV like BYD or NIO costs around $30,000 to manufacture in China, and it is sold in the US for $35,000 after shipping and dealer markups. A similar American-made EV like a Ford Mustang Mach-E costs around $40,000 to manufacture in the US and is sold for $45,000 in the market. So without tariffs, the Chinese car will cost $35,000 and the American car will cost $45,000. So clearly, the Chinese car is $10,000 cheaper, and most price-conscious American consumers would prefer the Chinese car or the American car, right? This is the reason why American manufacturers go bankrupt and the Chinese end up fueling their economy with more exports and more jobs. So what does Donald Trump do? To protect the American automakers, let's say Donald Trump imposes a 25% tariff on Chinese cars. Now the Chinese car gets a hit with an extra 25% tax on its $35,000 selling price. That adds $8,750 to the price tag. So now the new price of the Chinese car is $35,000 plus $8,750 equal to $43,750. Now the price gap between the American and the Chinese car shrinks dramatically. Chinese car costs $43,750 and the American car costs $45,000. And now with only a $1,250 difference, the American car makers have a much better chance to compete with Chinese imports. This helps keep American manufacturing alive and prevents China from flooding the US market with cheaper vehicles. This is how tariffs are supposed to work. So this looks pretty great, right? Trump is out there flexing his economic muscle and he's slapping tariffs on Chinese companies and making them pay. So the Chinese will lose business and the Americans will win, right? Wrong. Because like I said, while most people think it is an economic masterstroke, the Wall Street Journal is calling this strategy the dumbest trade war in history.
There may be some better justification for what the journal's editorial board has called the dumbest trade war in history.
Donald Trump is doing so many stupidly bad things, so badly stupidly, that it's difficult to keep up.
And when we did our analysis, it did make sense. So let's break it down to understand how the tariff strategy might actually fail. Look at this. Before Trump's tariffs, an American bought a Chinese-made smartphone for $1,000. And now Trump decides to punish China and slaps a 10% tariff on Chinese electronics. Sounds great, right? China should be paying for this. Except they don't. Instead, the Chinese company just increases the price to $1,100. So now that same smartphone costs $1,100. And guess who pays this extra $100? It's not some uncle sitting in Beijing, guys. It's Bob from Texas and Karen from New York who are standing at the store thinking, why the hell is this phone costing $100 more? And if you multiply this across millions of products from laptops to washing machines to car parts, suddenly you will see that the Americans are shelling out billions of dollars just to punish the Chinese. So yes, Americans are paying the money and they're expecting that the Chinese will be punished. And what is China doing? Nothing. It is still selling the same stuff just at higher prices. And here's where you need to understand the might of the Chinese power. You see guys, firstly, the American products can't replace the Chinese products overnight because the labor and resource cost of China is far lesser than the US. Look at this, a Tesla Model 3 is 65% cheaper to be made in Shanghai than in the US. Secondly, even made in America products import Chinese raw materials to produce them in America. So if China increases its taxes on raw materials, automatically the American products in America will get costlier. And lastly, even with additional taxes, the American products still can't beat the Chinese products. And in certain sectors, China's price advantage is absolutely mind-blowing. For example, in footwear and headwear goods, China was the lowest cost supplier for 59% of the products. And in metal products, this number stood at 54%. So in short, economists say that even if heavy tariffs are imposed on the Chinese products, it will take money out from the Americans, but it won't punish the Chinese. In fact, according to Peterson's Institute for International Economics, Trump's tariffs will cost the average American household an additional $1,200 a year. This is the reason why China has America by its throat, and even the mighty superpower of the United States of America is not able to shake up China. So if the Chinese products aren't going anywhere, who gets these extra $100? It's the government of the United States of America. So will the tariffs kill Chinese jobs or the American jobs? Well, we don't know yet, because economists say that even if the American companies try to move back to the US for manufacturing, it will be a nightmare for them. For example, if Apple made iPhones in the US instead of China, the price could jump from $1,000 to $2,400. And why is that? It is because of the labor costs. US workers earn $24 per hour compared to just $3.6 in China. Similarly, key parts like screens and cameras are still made in China, which will add import costs if assembled in the US. On top of that, just like the Indian government, even the US business regulations are too bad, which could weaken manufacturing infrastructure and push the cost of the iPhone even higher. In fact, even Elon Musk spoke about this at the Joe Rogan podcast.
Trump likes to talk a lot is tariffs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on tariffs?
So when there are sudden changes in tariffs, then you're like, well, we've got a factory like somewhere else that's making a part that goes into the car. Now that suddenly, if that part's suddenly twice as expensive, it like messes everything up. I'm against like sudden giant tariffs. If you've got to, move 1,000 tons of equipment, or collectively millions of tons of equipment, you just can't do that overnight. It's literally impossible.
So all in all, this makes it impractical to move from China all the way to US. Secondly, the tariff could cause a job crisis. President Trump loves to say that tariffs could create jobs, but the economists argue at what cost? Because if you look at the 2018 case study of the washing machine tariffs, after being imposed with 20% tariff, washing machines made in China became very costly. So companies like Samsung and LG, they opened US factories and created 1,800 new jobs. Well, it sounds great until you realize that those 1,800 jobs cost American consumers $1.5 billion a year in additional prices. So Americans paid $800,000 per job created. And here's where it gets worse. Tariffs don't just create jobs, they also destroy them. For example, in 2018, Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs were supposed to protect American manufacturers. But you know what actually happened? Steel got more expensive, car and machinery manufacturers got crushed by the high cost of steel, and studies estimate that 75,000 manufacturing jobs were lost because of the rising prices. So yes, some jobs were created, but more jobs were lost because of tariffs. And lastly, the economists of America fear that when China responds by taxing back the US goods in China, it could cause a nightmare for American industries. Look at this. The last time this tariff war happened during the Trump tenure, by 2019, China had levied 8 to 25% tariffs on most US goods that it imports. And this move was so devastating that it began eroding the American agriculture market. If you know, soybean is the single most valuable US export crop to China. But after tariffs, soybean saw the exports drop by almost 75%. And not just soybean, even pork and sorghum was so badly hit that in total, the American agriculture market lost $26 billion. Similarly, China said American cars sell in America, but their components go from China, right? So they raised their tariffs on Chinese components in the US, because of which American manufacturers faced higher costs and they again had to cut back on profits. Eventually, they had to restrict expansion and even cut wages. So now what remains to be seen is how will China China responded in 2025 to the second round of Trump's sanctions. And while these Americans and Chinese are engaged in this tariff war, the good thing is that for India, this presents a wonderful opportunity. Because if Chinese products get more expensive, Indian goods should become more competitive in the US market. So as American companies are moving away from China, India is the next alternative, right? So will India become a superpower because of this trade war? Well, unfortunately, just like many other golden opportunities, we are not even capable of utilizing this trillion-dollar economic opportunity. Why? Because we have three major issues, guys. Firstly, we have the bureaucratic nightmare of setting up a business in India.
Every file requires 4 or 5 signatures in a particular order of sequence. If one guy's on leave or sick or traveling somewhere on duty or whatever, the file just sits until he comes back and signs that file.
While registering a company in Vietnam takes 6 months, in India it could take up to 5 years. In fact, Elon Musk wanted to bring Tesla to India, but India slapped 100% import duties and drowned him in policy red tape. Now this is fine if they were luring Tesla to come to India, but even after 5 years of negotiation, nothing concrete has come out. And it's not just Tesla. Over 1,000 projects in Gujarat alone are stuck due to environmental clearances. Meanwhile, Samsung set up an entire smartphone factory in Vietnam in just 1 year with $22 billion in investment. This is a first problem that we have, which are Sarkari Babus and their procedures. The second problem is the land acquisition issue. Did you know, even when foreign investors want to set up factories in India, it is very difficult to get a piece of land in India. Look at this. In 2005, a South Korean steel giant named POSCO announced a $12 billion investment in Odisha, which could have been India's biggest foreign investment ever. But after 10 years of legal battle over land, POSCO walked away in 2017.
POSCO stalled project to build a steel mill in the Indian state of Odisha.
The biggest foreign direct investment ever in India is yet to take off.
The project was launched in 2005 but has been delayed for roughly 9 years due to land acquisition issues and environmental concerns.
Largest foreign direct investment project, POSCO is paralyzed by protesters who are determined not to allow the takeover of their land.
And thirdly, we have a skill gap. Look at this. Only 2% of India's workforce is formally skilled, whereas in South Korea it's 96%, in Japan it's 80%, in China it's 40%, and even in Vietnam it is 12%. This is what the Skill India initiative was supposed to fix. But even after years of efforts, only 5% of India's workforce has formal training. So even in industries where India could dominate, like automobile manufacturing, textiles and electronics, we simply don't have enough trained workers to capitalize on this opportunity. And while China and South Korea invest heavily into AI, automation and R&D, India is still struggling to train her people for basic manufacturing. So even though this is a big opportunity for India, India unfortunately is too slow, too bureaucratic and too unprepared to capitalize on it. We have become better in the past 10 years, but not good enough. So Vietnam is winning, Mexico is winning, and even Bangladesh is winning. So until India fixes its business climate, simplifies regulation, and closes its skill gap, the dream of becoming China's replacement will always remain a distant dream. So the question is, how do we fix this? Well, we've made a detailed playlist on this, which you can watch from the link in the description. This is what completes our analysis of Donald Trump's tariff strategy. Now you tell me in the comments, what are the lessons that India is supposed to learn from this tariff war and how can we capitalize on this opportunity? That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.